Good evening. In our headlines tonight, the Senate moved another step closer to approving sweeping communications reforms, while abroad tensions continue to build along the border.
In 1975, the United States Senate launched an investigation that would shake the foundations of American journalism.
He intends to establish on the record the scope of the activities undertaken. We will proceed methodically, nothing concealed.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'd like to begin by clarifying the timeline.
What they discovered was a secret program so extensive, so deeply embedded in the media landscape, that it called into question every news report Americans had consumed for decades. Over 400 American journalists, major newspapers, television networks, news agencies that shaped public opinion across the globe, all working for the Central Intelligence Agency. The operation had a name, Mockingbird, and the documents prove it wasn't a conspiracy theory. It was official policy. In January 1975, Senator Frank Church convened the Select Committee to study governmental operations with respect to intelligence activities. The goal was simple: investigate CIA abuses of power. What they found in the CIA's own files was a systematic program of media manipulation. The agency had recruited journalists from every major American news organization, not as occasional sources, as full-time operatives. The Church Committee report, released in 1976, documented relationships with reporters at the New York Times, CBS News, Time Magazine, Newsweek, the Associated Press, United Press International, Reuters, and dozens more. Over 400 American journalists. Some worked as paid CIA assets. Others provided intelligence under the guise of normal reporting. Many didn't even know they were being used. The program served multiple purposes: plant stories favorable to U.S. interests, suppress stories damaging to American foreign policy, gather intelligence from foreign contacts, shape public perception of international events. For over 2 decades, the line between journalism and intelligence operations had disappeared. The CIA targeted journalists in several ways. Some were approached during overseas assignments. Foreign correspondents were especially valuable. They had access, they had cover, and they could move freely in sensitive regions. Others were recruited directly from journalism schools. The agency identified promising students and cultivated relationships early. By the time they landed at major news organizations, they were already on the payroll. Payment varied. Some received direct compensation. Others got exclusive access to classified information for their reporting, making them look like the best journalists in their field while actually serving as intelligence conduits. The operation's real power wasn't just intelligence collection. It was narrative control. CIA-affiliated journalists could shape how Americans understood global events. When the agency wanted to justify intervention in Latin America, stories appeared in major newspapers about communist threats. When covert operations needed public support, investigative reports materialized, providing exactly the right framing. The 1954 Guatemala coup, the Bay of Pigs invasion, the Vietnam War escalation. Each had media operations running parallel to the military and political campaigns. When the Church Committee began its investigation, the CIA moved quickly to protect its assets. According to the committee's final report, the agency destroyed significant documentation about journalist relationships. The names released in the final report were heavily redacted. Journalists who had worked with the CIA were protected. News organizations that had hosted operatives were shielded. CIA Director William Colby testified that the agency had ended journalist recruitment. But the committee found evidence that operational relationships continued, simply renamed and reorganized. Operation Mockingbird reveals a fundamental principle of intelligence operations. Control of information is control of reality. If you can determine what people know, you can determine what they think If you can determine what they think, you can determine what they do. This isn't about individual journalists making bad choices. This is about institutional capture, the systematic infiltration of the Fourth Estate by the intelligence apparatus. The Church Committee concluded that these relationships posed a threat to the integrity of the press. But they didn't conclude that the threat had ended, only that it had been exposed. In 2014, journalist Carl Bernstein, yes, the Watergate reporter, published his own investigation into CIA media relationships. His finding: the practice never stopped. It evolved. Where Operation Mockingbird used newspaper correspondents, modern operations use think tanks, policy institutes, and expert commentators. The tools changed. The strategy remained. The National Security Agency's own documents, released by Edward Snowden, reference media operations and narrative shaping. Different words, same purpose. Operation Mockingbird damaged something that can never be fully repaired: trust in institutional journalism. When people learned that major news organizations had hosted intelligence operatives, the question became impossible to answer. Who can we trust? The response from the journalism industry was to strengthen ethics codes, increase transparency, and create more robust fact-checking systems. But the fundamental question remained: how do you prove independence when independence was compromised? The Church Committee led to reforms. The CIA officially ended journalist recruitment, or so they said. But declassified documents from the 1980s, 1990s, and 2000s show continuing relationships with media figures. The strategy shifted. Instead of recruiting journalists directly, intelligence agencies now cultivate relationships with think tanks and policy institutes. These organizations provide expert analysis to media outlets. The same goal, different routing, and in the digital age, Operation Mockingbird's methods have gone global. State-sponsored influence campaigns, coordinated inauthentic behavior, algorithm manipulation. The tools are new. The playbook is old. The Church Committee warned in 1976 that intelligence agencies operating in a domestic media space posed a threat to democracy itself. That threat didn't end. It adapted. Operation Mockingbird wasn't an aberration. It was a revelation, a glimpse into how information warfare actually works, how narratives are constructed, how public opinion is manufactured. The documents are public. The reports are declassified. The evidence is available. The question isn't whether it happened. The question is whether it ever stopped.